Zuby, how are you, brother?
Always good, man. How are you?
I'm good, man. Good to see you.
Likewise.
Good to see you. We're nearly out of prison, man. We're kind of on day release right now.
Yeah, it's been crazy, man. I don't know what is going on in the UK, but been deeply uncomfortable. I have not been a fan whatsoever, as anyone who follows me probably is aware. Yeah, it's been really weird times, man. It's been very revealing. It's yeah, mostly in a negative way, but it's I think there's always positives to take away from these things still.
Well, we're going to get into all that because I'm definitely more of a statist than you are.
Most definitely.
I'd probably give the government too much forgiveness and sympathy for their mistakes, but I feel myself getting edged further and further away from them. So we're going to get into that, but a few things to talk about. Firstly, a couple of years ago, you were a UK rapper, and now you're a UK rapper who's been on Joe Rogan, been retweeted by Donald Trump, and had all kinds of crazy shit happen.
Yeah, it's
like,
been a
what
weird
the
ride.
fuck? How'd you take it all in, dude? How'd you take it all in?
Man, I take it all in my stride. I mean, I've been working for a really long time. I put out my first album 15 years ago. So I've been grinding for way longer than most people realize and most people know. By the time most people discovered me, I'd already put out 8 albums, sold over 25,000 albums, totally independently, built up a following in the multiple tens of thousands, primarily in the UK, but around the world. I'd performed in 8 different countries, etc. So I had a lot of achievements and a lot of accolades and things that I'd just done, right? A lot of hard work under my belt by the time that a lot of people discovered me. I'd say probably now that probably in the region of 98% of people who know me now probably discovered me in the last 2 and a little bit years. So it's been a real sort of exponential growth curve in that sense. So, I mean, this next album that I'm going to be putting out, I think to a lot of people it's almost like it's going to be a lot of people's first introduction to my music, despite the fact I've put out so much music already. So it's been a little bit weird, but because I've been in the game for so long, it's been to me, it's still kind of been gradual, right? It's been very gradual. So I've had a lot of time to adjust to it in every aspect, deal with both the love and the praise and also the criticism and the hate and just having people online or offline who don't know you talking about you, whether they're talking positively or negatively. For well over a decade, I've been stopped in the street or in shopping malls or whatever in different cities around the UK, people wanting an autograph, people wanting pictures, whatever it is. And so I've for a long time, I've been in that weird position, which is where I still am, which is that a lot of people know me, but I can still go to the shopping, go to the supermarket by myself and generally not be bothered or whatever. So you're kind of in that weird stage between having millions of people know who you are, but you're not at that kind of like crazy celebrity level where it's like, oh, wow, it seems like everyone knows who you are. And I think that's one of the weird things with the internet. And then also the fact that my audience has shifted from primarily being in the UK to primarily being in the USA now. So that's also been really interesting.
Yeah, I have a similar thing with that. Like 55% of my listeners are, 50 to 55 is US based, which is weird. But you're a hustler, dude. Like, I know the grind, man. I know the grind. I've worked my balls off, right? I get it. And it's like the iceberg, right? People are only seeing the iceberg outside of the water. They're not seeing like the hustle that's underneath that's gone on for years. Like the packing up your van, going to we talked about this before. You go up to you say mall because there's Americans going to be listening to this, but the shopping center and putting up your stand and hustling away. I know you've hustled and you've put the work in, right?
Yeah, most definitely, man. I mean, it's been a long grind. I mean, I started selling my CDs on the street back in 2006. And all throughout university, my second year and third year of university, whenever I had free time, pretty much every weekend, I was out there in Oxford on Cornmarket Street, or sometimes I'd go to London and go to Leicester Square and just be out there talking to strangers all day. And then that eventually started becoming the whole country. So whether I was in Manchester or Norwich or Newcastle or Glasgow, even the flipping Isle of Wight. Like I went everywhere, just literally talking to strangers, passing out flyers, selling my CDs, you know, between £5 and £10 a pop, and just grinding, you know, talking literally to, I've met probably 500,000 people in real life. And people can really vouch for that, because I still get messages or YouTube comments like, man, I remember meeting you back in Bristol 8 years ago. Oh, I remember meeting you in Bournemouth 7 years ago. I bought your CD, all that kind of stuff. So it's really cool having so many people who did support me really early, sort of being able to see what's going on. Before all this lockdown stuff really kicked in hard early last year, I actually went to just like a cafe or something in a random cafe in Bournemouth. And two of the people working there had both seen me on Joe Rogan, and they were just like, yeah, like, you know, we watched that together, and it's really cool having you here and stuff like that. And when I was in the States in 2019, it was the same thing. In every single city, I got recognized by people, and these are places I'd never been to in my life. So it's kind of trippy, but, you know, I think it shows, as you know, I think any entrepreneur, any creative person, you know how much work you've put in and how much goes in behind the scenes, right? So whether it's music or it's a podcast or whatever it is, a piece of art, people generally just see the finished product, right? Yep. They don't see us recording this right now. They're not going to see the editing process. They're not going to see all of the stuff. They just see the final finished product. You know, when you make an album and you release a song, people are like, okay, I hear this song and I like it or I don't like it, but they don't see the writing process and going to the studio and recording it and then mixing it to get the sound and then mastering it to get the sound perfect. And a single song, putting in, man, I mean, multiple days can go into a single song, let alone an entire album. And people just don't see any of that. And then they'll just see you pop up. And it's the same with social media. People will see a fault like, oh, wow, this guy has 1 million subscribers on YouTube or 100,000 followers on Twitter or 100,000 on Instagram or whatever. And they sort of imagine that you sort of just jumped there, or like you just, right? Like it was just kind of lucky, or one thing happened. I mean, to this day, I still get, like, obviously I'm massively grateful for everyone who's invited me onto their shows and their podcasts and everyone who's helped me and stuff. But there are still people who think like I have my whole Twitter following just because of the Joe Rogan experience. Right. And they're just like, oh, you know, if I say, yeah, awesome, I just hit 370,000 followers, someone will be like, yeah, thanks to Joe Rogan. And I'm kind of like, you know, like when I went on Joe Rogan, I think directly from that, I probably gained, you know, a good number. I probably gained about 10 to 15,000 followers across the board, maybe 10 to 20 directly from that. But it's like, man, there's a lot of people who have been on Joe Rogan 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and they don't have the following I have. It's not as simple as that. And also, how do you even get on Joe Rogan? It's not like you don't just email him and say, yeah, I want to be on your show, and walk in there tomorrow. So I don't know. I think people are funny. You know, people like to imagine that success is, people like to downplay other people's success. Not everyone does, right? Not everyone does, but there are certain people who they won't kind of, in my view, you get different types of haters, right? You get the haters that are very direct. Like you get different types of haters. You get the ones who are very direct, and they'll just constantly be going at you, or, you know, writing negative comments or whatever it is. But then you also get the ones who are like, they sort of make these comments where it's a bit more annoying in a way, because like they never kind of want to give you credit. It's like they can't just give you credit and say, you know what, mate, like, well done, fair play. Props. Yeah, fair play. It's always like, oh, well, you wouldn't have done it if it wasn't for this, or it's only because of that, or it's because of this. And I'm kind of like, come on, man, can't you just like say lucky. Well done? Yeah, can't you just say well done? You know, it would be like someone seeing your success with your Bitcoin, you know, and someone's, oh, you know, well, you're just lucky you got it at the right time, or you're just lucky, like, you know, you got this guest or whatever. And I'm kind of like, come on, man, like, just, it's so, you can be quiet, or you can just say like, well done, congrats. Like, it's not that painful to say.
I get it, man. Like I know early on when I had like a group with 10 people on Facebook and I had like 100 Twitter followers. And I remember the times where I would get on a flight to New York, and then I'd get there and I would have to do some work. I'd go to sleep. I'd get up. I'd do 3 interviews. I'd go back to the hotel. I'd like edit and publish one. I'd go to bed. I'd get up. I'd go and get a flight to Ohio. Go and do another one. Go to bed. Get up. I'd then fly to Portland. Go to bed. Get up. And I would do that for 3 weeks, right? And I would get like, I don't know, 30, 40 interviews, come back, publish them. Like, I fucking grind it. I get the grind. They don't want to see it. They don't want to see it, dude. And it's not just that. They don't want you to make a single mistake. Like, I can be a fucking moron on Twitter, right? You make one mistake, they hold that forever. It's like, you've worked so hard, you've done 4 or 5, whatever years, but they keep bringing up that one mistake. Like, you're meant to be infallible.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's a weird one. I mean, this is something that I learned early. I mean, I started in my music in my late teens, and I learned pretty quickly, like, oh, wow, you know, people are going to really judge you and criticize you and misinterpret you and mischaracterize you and all of that. I mean, I had one experience which always sticks in my mind. This is about a year after I really started making music. And there was a local music magazine in Oxford, Night Shift, I think it's still going. And they gave my demo. This is before my album even came out. They gave me a demo of the month, right? And they were saying, you know, this Zuby guy's, this guy's promising, you know, he's a very promising artist. And, you know, generally, you know, people showed love and whatever. And then there was this online hip hop forum, which was quite popular at the time. And I was a member of it. I wasn't really active, but I remember going on there, and it was weird because there was a whole thread on me, right? Like, I was the thread topic.
Nice.
And there was this whole thread with, you know, dozens and dozens of pages of replies all about me. Right. So this is my first time. And this is before social media was kind of in the state it's in as well. And so I'm just there, like, reading all of these anonymous people who are actually based primarily in my city, just talking about me, right? Talking about me, talking about my music. And it was really odd. You know, there's some people saying positive things, but then, and also remember, like, I'm at Oxford University. So that in itself creates hate from certain people, right? Because some people are like, yeah. Some people are like, oh, who's this Oxford posh boy who thinks he can be a rapper or what, right? It's very judgmental. It's not even about my music. It's just like, oh, this guy is not quote unquote street. And I never claimed to be
street.
You know, and so
he ain't got no blunts. He ain't got no bitches.
So it was just really bizarre. So I'm like reading all this stuff. And there was one guy who was like, he was like really aggressive. He was like really, really like, he wasn't just talking about my music, but he was talking as if like I'd hurt him. Do you know what I mean? Like I'd done something to him personally. And I was like, why is this guy going so hard at me or whatever? So I actually responded in the thread, right? And I'm just like, yo, like, why are you saying? Because he was actually saying stuff that was borderline slanderous. You know what I mean? Like, that's
right. Yeah.
About me as a person and a character. I was like, I literally said, I wasn't even angry. I was just like, look, man, I've never met you. We've never spoken. I don't actually even know who you are. So I'd appreciate it if you didn't just start talking all this stuff about me, right? I was as magnanimous as I could be. And then he responded just saying sort of like, yeah, you know, well, it's a free world. I'll say whatever the hell I want. And I think your music is crap. And I think you're whatever. And I'm like, whoa, okay.
You fed the troll.
Yeah, but it turns out this guy was actually a local DJ, right? And so I saw, okay, the following night, he had an event in Oxford, right? So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to show up. Okay. Right. So I show up to this event and I'm like, you know, I know his name. And I see him on stage and I kind of work out and I'm like, okay, I see who this guy is. And it was really funny because he could see I was there and he was kind of like avoiding eye contact and trying to kind of whatever. And then eventually, you know, of course he had to come off stage and, you know, come down or whatever. And I just kind of approached him at the bar and I was like, you know, I won't say his name, but I was like, you know, are you such and such? And he was like, oh, Zuby, mate, so good to meet you in person. Like he played the whole friendly thing. And I was like, dude, dude, like, look, I'm not gonna like, you know, hurt you or something here, but I didn't appreciate all that stuff. And he was like, yeah, but you know, he's like, I was just mucking around, you know, it's just a joke. What? And I was like, dude, you know, just don't. I was like, I've even lost even more respect now because I'm like, I would have at least like gonna back up what you're saying, but it was one of those things. And that was just something that struck me as like, okay, the internet is where people will talk a lot of crap, talk a big game, but actually, if you confront them directly, 99% of the time they will, they'll back down or whatever it was. So that was quite revealing to me. So I had a lot of these experiences, obviously, when I was out in the street selling my music, getting, most people would be cool, as most people are decent, but
especially
when you talk
person,
to
right? Like,
yeah. But when you talk to hundreds of thousands of people, you're going to have some very, very negative interactions. So I just kind of got used to that. And honestly, a lot of people ask me how I deal with the negativity online, mostly on Twitter or YouTube or whatever. And I'm like, dude, you don't understand how much, like, I've dealt with this in the real world. So there's literally nothing anybody can say that A, I haven't already heard, and that 2 is really going to cut me that deep because I'm so assured and confident in who I actually am.
But dude,
whatever they say, it doesn't matter.
When you have one of those, when you have one of those days, right? And you've done something, you put something out, and there's like 100 really, really good comments, like, well done, respect, love it. And then you get that one person come in that's like, fuck you, fuck this, you're this. Why is it that one? Yeah. Why is it that one? We get drawn to it like, that motherfucker. You feel like you have to come up with the best reply. And like, really, just block that motherfucker and move on. But I do it. I do it, dude. Why is that?
It's hard, man. I think it's something wired in us. I mean, I think we all know, and this has been studied, is that human beings are more sensitive to, we're more sensitive to negative emotions than to positive ones. Right? Like the fear of, so for example, losing 100 pounds hurts you more than gaining 100 pounds, like feels good for you, right? The sense of loss hurts. The sense of fear. I think fear is literally the most powerful emotion, and we're always being manipulated by it, especially by governments and media. But the negative just stands out. And I think also we all have egos, right? So there's the confirmation. If someone is like, yeah, Zuby, I like your music, or hey, Peter, I like your podcast, and it's kind of an affirmation of what you already sort of, I guess, feel about yourself and what the general consensus is, because of course, most people who follow you do like you, right? They're generally following you because they like you. So it's kind of like confirmation. And then someone just going, ooh, okay. And then I think also you're trying to decipher, is this a legitimate criticism? Or is this someone just trying to troll and get a reaction? Or is this a hater? Is this like a threat? I think it sets off the threat detector. It's kind of like, okay, wait, hang on. What is this? In the same way, to give like a weird analogy, but I guess it's relevant. If you were out on a walk and you see 20 different animals and 19 of them are harmless, and then you see a snake, right? Then like you respond more to the snake. Yeah, you respond to the snake because it's like, okay, that's a potential threat. I mean, it might even be a harmless snake, but it sets off something in your brain that goes, oh, that's a potential threat. So you don't notice the birds, you don't notice the squirrels, you don't notice, even a cat or a dog, like you barely notice them. But then it's like, oh, this thing stands out to me. So I think it's just something innate in human beings that the negative, anything negative kind of like pierces through that armor.
But there's different types of negative stuff as well, right? I don't know if you have this. Like you can get the comment which is like, fuck you, I hate your face, like everything about you, I hope you die. But then you get one that's like, yeah, I listened to your latest show and I just don't think you did a very, very good job. And it's like, oh God, that one really hurt. Because that's like a valid criticism. That's somebody actually probably likes what you do and they're disappointed. And it's like, oh shit, what did I get wrong here? Like, whereas like the real hatey people, you're just like, yeah, go fuck yourself back. But like those real kind of like, it's almost like the other day I get the Chartable update for my podcast. It shows all the latest reviews and it's like 5-star, beats the best, blah, 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 whatever. And then there's this like 2-star one that's just saying, yeah, whatever it was, like he's not a very good interviewer, doesn't research well. And I was just like, and it ruined my day. That one review.
Man. Yeah. I mean, I'm blessed in that I'm just not a particularly sensitive person. Yeah. Well, no, I'm just not that. I'm less sensitive than the average person, considerably less sensitive actually, but just based on my personality type, which is, very healthy for me. Cause I think if a lot of people would go psychotic if they dealt with a fraction of what I do. But yeah, with stuff like that, I view it as, look, the real truth is, it doesn't matter what you do. Nobody likes negative feedback. Nobody likes negative criticism. and we know actually it hurts more from someone who is closer to you, right? If your parents or one of your siblings, or I don't know, if you're a parent, your child, like if someone close to you, a friend, gives you negative feedback, it hurts a lot more because you value their opinion more, right? But I think the way I frame it anyway is like, okay, that's kind of like my ego protection, but let me take this on board. Whether or not I agree with the feedback, that's kind of irrelevant, but let me take it on board because I think intention matters, right? If someone is saying something because they're a regular listener to your podcast and they think like, okay, that particular episode, you could have done this better or that better. It's like, okay, that kind of hurts my ego a bit, but I can do something useful with that. Cool. Okay. And I think, yeah, so that's kind of the way I frame it. And feedback like that is also how you get good. You know, beyond practice, it's also how you get good, because especially if there's a pattern, if it's just one anomaly, you can normally kind of dismiss it. But if you've got, 10 people are like, oh, that episode, I don't know, the sound quality was bad, or you talked too much and you didn't let your guest speak enough, or, whatever it is, then it's like, okay, cool. All right. For next time, I know what to do. And then ultimately you become better. And so I think as creators, I think we want to embrace anything that can make us better, regardless of how it makes us sort of feel in that moment.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me about the record, man. I've ordered my copy. I don't know when I get it.
Thank you.
Tell me, like, what's fed into this one? Is it this past year? Is it just everything you've been through? Is it all personal? Is it a mix of personal? What the fucking crazy shit in the world? Is it blunts and bitches?
I don't smoke blunts. And well, the honeys. That's another one. But honestly, for me, every single album is a snapshot of the period of my life leading up to it. What's going on for me internally, personally, in my heart, in my mind, what's happening in the world around me, what's happening in politics, culture, society, all of that stuff. So, I mean, my last album came out before a lot of the stuff we've been talking about happened. So my last album came out January 2019, before I broke the British women's deadlift record, before I went viral, before all these big podcast appearances, all of that. So
it still kills me, man. It still kills me. It still kills me every time. Every time I see it, every time I'm on your profile and I see it, it just kills me every time. But I'm like, can you not enter the Olympics? Can you pull something there?
I don't know, man. There's no powerlifting in the Olympics, though. There should be.
Shit,
they have silly things like dressage, but they don't have powerlifting.
It's a total moment of genius, dude. I respect you so much.
Thank you so much. So actually, I haven't put out much new music at all since all of this stuff happened. And a lot has happened in the world. A lot's happened in my life. A lot's happened in my career. A lot's happened in the world. A lot's happened in culture, society, all of that. So,
how old are you, Zuby? Do you mind me asking?
No, I'm 34.
Okay, you're a bit younger than me. Like, you're a good 8 years younger than me. But I would say the last year has been the most significant year of my life. I cannot remember so much happening in 1 year.
Okay. Like, I'd love to come back to that.
A total shift in the world. But you carry on, man. Yeah,
man. So I talk about all of this. So I feel like the album is called Word of Zuby, and I feel like it's my most everything album. I think it's my most motivational and uplifting one. It's also my most personal one. I think it's my most controversial one. It's my most provocative. It's my most aggressive. It's my most political. It's also my most religious album. It's kind of like everything. I mean, I think in the past few years, I very much like I've always been someone who is true to myself and honest and kind of keeps it real. But one thing that's really happened over the last 5 years, especially, is, and I think some of this is just maturity, some of it is experience, some of it is actually what's happening in the world around me, is as you know, like I've become not just more outspoken, but I've become a lot more confident in who I am and what I believe and what the overall message I want to put out there is, and kind of what my role in the world is. Right. I think I've attracted a big audience both within and outside of my music because people get me, right? Like I have a certain worldview, and some people agree with it very strongly. Some people agree with it to a degree and disagree with other aspects. Some people are very much opposed to it. And when I started out in music, most artists, I think by default, you kind of want everybody to like you, right? You want to relate to everybody. You want to cast the net very wide. You don't want to polarize. You don't want to say something on Twitter that may upset any single person in your audience, etc. And as time has gone on, I just don't care about any of that anymore. Like it's gone from me wanting everyone to like me, to not really caring if everyone likes me, to actively not wanting certain people to even like me. Right. So, being sort of very clear on, okay, like this is my message. And you know what? The people who oppose me are people who believe in essentially the antithesis of my message. Right. So if you are not a fan of personal responsibility, and you're not a fan of hard work, and you're not a fan of honesty, and you're not a fan of self-sufficiency and self-sovereignty and working hard, whether that's through exercise, mentally, physically, whatever it is, personal development, like I'm all about that stuff. So if you have someone who's like opposed to those ideas, they're not going to be a Zuby fan, right? They're going to sort of oppose me on all these different levels. And I'm kind of like, good. I'm in a way, I'm like, okay, if they're a little bit open-minded, hopefully they can see what I'm doing, and it might take time and there will be resistance, but hopefully over some time, they'll get what I'm doing, and they'll understand that actually it comes from a good place, right? My intentions are good. I'm not out here trying to make the world a worse place, like very far from it. But I think if you promote that message of personal responsibility and self-development and try to be the best of yourself and not rely on this people, not blame your race or gender or whatever characteristic, your class, whatever characteristics you have, blame all your problems on that. Expect the government to fix this for you. Expect this person to pay for that for you. All of that, right? It's kind of, for me, they're all linked together, right? They're all tied together. My sort of innate libertarianism is tied to my love of going to the gym and working out and improving your body. I've been very vocal about all these lockdowns and the mandates and all that kind of stuff. It's like, it's all tied together and it's all real. It's not like, okay, this is my sort of marketing plan. It's just like, well, that's who I am. That's what I believe. And the world needs those voices. The world needs those voices, because it seems like on a lot of issues, especially over the past years, it's like there are so many things where it feels like one side of the argument it gets all the spotlight, or is the only sort of acceptable viewpoint. And it sort of narrows this Overton window to the point where someone is just saying something that's actually like a view held by millions or billions of people, and it's very popular, might even be the majority opinion, but somehow they feel silenced, or they're treated as if they're very fringe or whatever. Like, I don't think, some people view me as someone who's like, I've got one of my friends actually calls me Mr. Controversial. And like, I don't think that.
I wonder why.
Yeah, but the truth is, if the world were sane, Peter, if the world were sane, very little that I say would be controversial, right? Even that viral deadlift tweet, if I go back to Nigeria and I show that to my family in Nigeria, they don't even understand it, right? They don't even understand it. Like, if I showed that to someone in the UK in 2008, they wouldn't understand it. They wouldn't find it funny. Because they'd be like, what do you mean you identified as a woman? Like, what does that even mean? Like, the context, we hadn't yet reached the clown world to the point that that's even funny, right? Because they'd just be like, if I show that to most people around the world, they'd be like, what do you mean you identified as a woman? You're a man. Like, I don't get it. Why is this funny? So you kind of need that context of this modern era where there's certain ideas around, these gender ideology stuff or whatever it is, for it to even have the context to be funny. I mean, we live in a time.
What makes something controversial? What makes something controversial?
Great question.
You know what?
Great question.
Because I got the definition up there, like a prolonged public dispute. So controversy is a prolonged public dispute, debate, or contention, disputation concerning a matter of opinion. So it's a matter of opinion. But what makes, so for example, you pick something like abortion. Is pro-life controversial? Is pro-choice controversial? Or are they both controversial because it's something that really splits public opinion?
Yeah, it's a good question.
I never even thought about it.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a controversial topic in general due to the very nature of it. And then I feel like, yes, in the UK, pro-life is a controversial position because it's not the one, it's the one you're going to catch the flack for, right? If you're pro-choice,
it's not the law.
Yeah, because it's not the default position. The default position in the UK is so-called pro-choice. I have an issue with that term, but that's, you know, let's call it what it is, right? To kind of give it its credit. That's the default position. Even if someone hasn't thought, I'll tell you how you know the default position is if someone has not even spent a lot of time thinking about or researching or debating the issue, what is their view most likely to be, right? And the truth is, in the UK anyway, this isn't globally, but in the UK, the default position is just like, you know, kind of pro-choice by default, right? I used to be pro-choice by default, not because I'd never really thought of it, and I'd sort of outsourced my thinking to other people. It's like, okay, well, the law is probably right, and the majority opinion is probably right. Other people have kind of thought about this, whatever. And also, it's one of those issues, you know, thank God I'd never been in a position where I needed to like massively think about it. And then when I really did, I was like, oh wow, I'm very pro-life, like obviously, right? Like very clearly. I'd always sort of leaned that way, and sort of my like, I guess like my moral leaning, like I'd always felt like, okay, like abortion, that's something that, you know, on my very first single, I even mentioned it. And that's in 2006.
Pro-life as in pro-life personally, or pro-life in terms of legislation?
Okay, so I think there's actually that's an interesting point, because I think there's two aspects of the argument. I think there's the moral position and there's the legal position.
Yeah.
And me, I'm pro-life on both. And that's the only way I could even be consistent based on my belief. Not just my beliefs, but just based on facts plus my moral foundations. Pro-life is the only thing I can be on both fronts. I'd say See, go ahead. I
think the reason your friend calls you Mr. Controversial, but I think he says it in a way, and he probably doesn't. He probably has a different meaning from where I see it. I think he thinks you're Mr. Controversial because he sees you getting involved in topics which are kind of like will cause heated
ones you
debates.
Don't want to talk about.
Yeah, you don't want to talk about. Whereas I see it similar, but I would say Mr. Controversial because for the same reason, but you're willing to absolutely be firm about your position, whatever the response may be from the public, whether it's popular opinion or unpopular opinion. You're controversial because, like, some of us will shy away, right? Like, there are certain people who are probably pro-life but just don't want to admit it.
Yeah, definitely. Tons of them. Millions.
Yeah, there's probably plenty of people who are either pro-trans rights or, you know, anti-trans, like whatever. There's plenty of people who will just go with public opinion. I think especially, you know, some middle-class lefties will, because they're really scared of the response they'll get from their friends. And I know it because during the Brexit and the election, I was just posting some pretty controversial things up on Facebook just to test things, just to see what the response would be. Things like, I don't agree with maternity and paternity pay. I think it's your choice to have a child, and it shouldn't be the people who choose not to have children shouldn't be paying for your choice. Just to see what the things were, and like it really upsets some people because it's not popular opinion. Yeah. So I agree with your friend, but I just see it slightly differently.
Yeah, it's also just, you know, I also like to make people think, right? I like to challenge questions, because the truth is, most people don't really think about. Like, most people just accept their opinions from the herd, right? They outsource their thinking. They don't really think, okay, what do I really believe and why do I believe it, right? Or even know the facts. Like, most people don't even know to use that, you know, what we're talking like, most people don't even know how an abortion is done, right? They don't even know what it is, right? Even some women who get them, they don't even know what happens, right? There have been women who have had abortions, and then deeply, like, once they actually learn what happened, because the so-called doctors doing them don't tell them, the abortionists don't tell them, and in fact, like they bar them from even getting certain types of information because they don't want them to see it, right? They don't want them to see the scan, they don't want them to see the baby before it's killed, etc. And it's like, okay, well, why do they not want that? If pro-life people put up pictures of aborted babies, or fetuses, I don't care what term you use, it's the same human being. If they put up pictures and show, okay, this is what an aborted baby looks like, people don't want to see that. Like, it's horrible. It's like disgusting images. I know why people don't want to see it, but it's like, well, that's what you've done, right? That's your kid right there. But people don't want that. I mean, like, this is just facts. Like, those are just facts, but people don't want the facts because, I mean, the facts make the pro-life side much, much stronger, right? It's much easier to talk in euphemisms and in slogans and in, my body, my choice. And that this is why people don't, abortion itself is a bit of a euphemism, right? But they're always using euphemisms, reproductive rights, a woman's right to choose. What else do they say? Even if you go on an abortion provider's website, they'll never, ever, ever use the word baby. They'll call it pregnancy tissue, or they'll say, we removed the pregnancy, termination of pregnancy, whatever. And it's like, they always use this language to get around what's actually being done, right? They're not, right? They don't want to say, yeah, we rip your baby apart limb by limb, or, we poison the baby and then, we then rip it out limb by, like, they don't want to say that because it's awful, right? It's something horrible. But if you speak about it in euphemisms, you can kind of create this distance between, I guess, your sort of rational side and your emotions, where it's like, okay, well, saying you support a woman's right to choose sounds a lot nicer and a lot more palatable than saying, you think it's okay for a baby to be killed as long as it hasn't been born yet, right? And even if you say the term baby, some people be like, it's not a baby, it's a fetus. And that's like, okay, fetus means unborn baby. That's literally the meaning. In many languages, there's not even a different word for fetus and baby, right? It's the same thing. It's the same human being. You used to be a fetus. I used to be a fetus. Up until the point we came out of our mothers, we were both so-called fetuses, right? We're the same human. If you kill us there or you kill us there, pre-birth, post-birth, whatever, we're dead. So that's all it is. Yeah, so I like to, as I've said a few times, I think on Twitter, is I'm very much, when it comes to social commentary or talking about cultural issues, whatever it is I like to get people to think, right? Obviously,
well, it works. Let me explain to you how it works.
Good. Okay, go ahead.
Because I don't agree with you on everything, and sometimes I've jumped in, but what's happened is a couple of times I've jumped in, and there's a little backlash from some of your followers, and that's like. It's made me think. So you put something up the other day about, and we'll get onto the pandemic, but about the pandemic with regards to COVID numbers, like how many actually died with COVID. And I was typing a response. I was like, am I just responding? Do I actually know? And then I went and did some research, and I wasn't confident enough to reply. So I didn't actually reply to it because I wasn't confident enough in my answer. But it definitely did make me think, and it made me go and research. So if that's what you're trying to do, it's worked on me. Okay,
cool. What were you going to reply out of interest?
so what I was trying to understand, I think sometimes what I find really difficult with the pandemic, sometimes with debating on Twitter, is some of the nuance. So that idea that people don't die of COVID, but they are recorded on their certificate as dying with COVID, and I still haven't got to the bottom of it, but I've been trying very hard to try and get to the bottom of it and try and understand exactly what's going on. Because I try and think about what are the things I believe and what don't I believe. Okay, I don't believe that the government is sat there going, we get to keep them under lockdown. We get to put in new rules. We get to create new powers to oppress people. I just feel that governments, it's almost like a creature that gradually just becomes more authoritarian for whatever reason. But I don't think they're like rubbing their hands trying to become authoritarian. I mean, there was even the backlash from the Tory backbenchers with regard to COVID passports, right? Yeah. So I'm trying to understand, why do they put that on? Why do they put died with COVID? And so what I was trying to find out is the reason is you don't really die of COVID. COVID causes something like pneumonia, and then you die from pneumonia. And so it records on it, or it accelerates something. But it appears to me that COVID, there's like a COVID spectrum from dying from COVID, dying from conditions which come from COVID, or COVID accelerating other conditions. I'm trying to get to the bottom of that. It's really hard, and I've been trying to get to the bottom of that. Trying to say that in a tweet is very hard.
Yeah, but the fact remains is that, I mean, do you know how the deaths are counted in the UK?
It's basically if you die with COVID
within 28 days of a positive test.
Yeah, 28 days of a positive test. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think that what I'm trying to say, I think that's like a catch-all.
It is, yeah. But what it means is, I don't know if you know, I had COVID in January. Okay, so if I'd crashed my car on the 2nd of February and unfortunately died in a car accident, I would be marked as an official. I would be part of that statistic. Right?
Is that 100% true? Is that like I don't know. I haven't found that.
And any cause of death within 28 days of a positive test.
Okay, and what? So, do we know what percentage of like deaths that is? It's like
no,
I can imagine.
No, we don't. But yeah. Okay. This is a great way to show you how silly the counting is. So okay, imagine if you marked anyone who took the vaccine. Imagine if within 28 days of them taking the vaccine, if they died of any cause, you said that was because of the vaccine. You'd see that's very dishonest, right? Right? You'd see that's very dishonest. Okay, so if someone gets the vaccine, and then 3 weeks later they have a heart attack, or there's a traumatic accident, or they even commit suicide, and if you were to like, okay, well, that's a vaccine death, you'd be like, come on, man, no, it's not. Like that's right. That's not fair. So that's what they're doing with the numbers. Yeah, that's what they're doing with the numbers. So,
but why? Do you question why do you think they're doing that?
It's different in different places. I know in some places in the USA, for example, the funding that they get is tied to the number of COVID deaths. So there's a perverse incentive there to mark as many deaths as COVID as possible. I think some of it is a little bit malicious.
That's the US.
That's the US.
I'm with you on that.
In the UK, the honest answer is I don't know. I don't know. Someone could interpret it in different ways, right? The least charitable would be saying that, okay, they're trying to pump up the deaths to keep people scared so that they can continue to justify some of these measures, et cetera, or to, make more money off the vaccines by keeping people scared, et cetera. That's the least charitable. The most charitable would be, I guess, it's somehow very difficult to determine, the exact number of deaths, or if they don't have the time or whatever it is. I guess that's kind of the most charitable. The honest one is I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you know this. I mean, three members of my family are NHS doctors. My dad's an NHS. My dad, my brother, my brother's wife. So I talked to them about this stuff, and my dad himself, he's a consultant at the NHS, and he's like, yeah, the way the numbers are counted is ridiculous, right? And that's just a fact. It's like, okay, this is just how they are counted. So, and they're open about it. It's just that I think they're a little bit slick. So in the media, they'll say, there have been 140,000 COVID-related deaths in the UK, or there have been they'll just say COVID deaths, but then there'll be a little small print, and it says, even on the BBC, you can see it. It says, deaths within 28 days of a positive test, and those are really different things, right? Like that dying from or dying with or within a certain range. I'm like, that in itself is sketchy. And then there's also the whole thing with the PCR tests themselves.
They do record those separately. So they have they definitely record either I'd have to look it up. So it's either with you die directly from COVID or it's a comorbidity, right? Like, okay. I'd have to look it up.
But we don't know that
two separately.
But we don't know that former number. If they record it, we don't know it.
They're not putting those two numbers out in the press, right? But we know they are recording those numbers, because I'm trying to, I always want to question why, because, I'm in this Bitcoin world, and in this Bitcoin world, we have very, very cynical people who don't trust, they verify. And it's a spectrum, but a lot of anarchists who just don't believe anything, believes the government's ultimate evil. And I'm like, well, we had, when the pandemic hit, we had a Conservative Party in full control of government. Yeah, and we know politicians just want to keep their jobs. A pandemic isn't really good for politicians keeping their jobs. The only reason Conservatives will probably stay in power is because Keir Starmer's so weak, right? But Richie Sunak is in a very difficult position, the amount of debt he's putting onto the government. Boris Johnson's in a very difficult position. Like, the pandemic is not useful for government.
Oh, wow. I think it's a gift for them.
I don't think it is. I really don't think. I think it is if your belief is like we're always descending to 1984. Every government wants to be authoritarian, wants to create rules, and wants to enslave us. And I certainly think there are governments like that. I think there are authoritarian governments. I certainly think, under someone like Erdogan, perhaps that is a gift. I don't believe in the UK this is a gift. I actually think it's a real problem for the government. I think it doesn't mean I don't think they'll fuck it up. It doesn't mean I don't think there will be politicians who will do strike deals.
You think their motive is more positive and more benevolent than I do, essentially.
Possibly yes, but I do also think they're incompetent. I do think a lot of them make stupid mistakes. I do think there's some I do think there's corruption. I do think there's deals being done. I do think people are, but like there's all kinds of bad shit going on, but I don't believe there are politicians sat there going, rubbing their hands saying, great pandemic, we get to put in all these new laws and
that's interesting.
And enslave people.
Yeah, see, I do. And I'm not saying it's all of them. I'm not saying it's all of them. Like there are definitely good politicians out there. There are politicians who are in it for the right reasons. But there is no doubt, I mean, historically, globally, there is no doubt that there are plenty of people, thousands of people who get into politics because they crave power and authority or even personal enrichment, right? So I think it's tricky because when we talk about the government, we are talking about I think we're sort of talking about two things. I think we're talking about sort of like the overall beast, but then we're also talking about, a government is composed of individuals, right? It's like talking about society. So when we say, oh, society is this, you're talking about millions and millions of people, but I guess I don't know. They're not very definitive terms. So I think, and I think you've agreed with this, which is that the overall, like, governments by their nature, they exist for power and control and authority. And as we know, they naturally grow, right? It's very rare for a government
until they break.
It's very rare for them to shrink down naturally. They tend to grow. So when I say like, okay, the government is growing its power and its control and its authority, I'm kind of talking about that whole thing. And then within that, I think that there are absolutely individuals, whether they are MPs here or mayors or governors. You've seen some of the governors in the USA and how they've taken advantage of this to really, like, become little mini dictators and start putting in rules and stuff that they themselves, they don't believe in because they themselves are violating the rules.
Of course,
it's like communism, right? It's like, okay, these are the rules for you guys, but you plebs, but we're not following that. So that's when that it's very disingenuous, and that's when, like, the sinister aspects of it are there. And then, amongst that, I think, of course, there are going to be many people as well who are just trying to do their best job. Some of them will be competent. Some of them will be incompetent. I think the truth is it's kind of difficult to tell the difference between incompetence and malice sometimes.
Yeah,
right. Because they sort of look the same, right? It's like when you say something crazy on Twitter and sometimes you're not sure, wait, is this person being malicious or are they just kind of dumb? Like you can't, you can't really tell. So, but I think the reality is that the result kind of ends up being the same. So whether a police officer, okay, let's take a police officer. If a police officer kills an unarmed citizen in a situation where we all agree, okay, that person did not deserve to die, whether it was malicious or it was incompetent, it matters, but the result is the same, right? Whether that was just a poorly trained cop who killed someone because they just couldn't manage their trigger finger, or they actually had some malice in their head and they thought, hey, actually, I want to abuse my power and hurt this person. It matters in a way, but in another way, it sort of doesn't.
This is the exact question that's being asked of Derek Chauvin right now.
Yes,
was it malice
exactly.
or was it incompetence?
Yes.
And a lot of people believe he murdered him, and it depends how you define murder. I personally sit on the position where I don't think he was. I just don't believe he was thinking, "I'm going to murder you with my knee." I think, but it was the most incompetent action he could ever have done. But I don't think he was sitting there thinking, "I'm murdering you."
Yeah, it's hard to know, man. I mean, I think that there is no doubt that there was, whether or not the intention was murder. I mean, in that situation, having watched that video, there's certainly a disregard. There's certainly like a disregard for the harm that he is causing, right? Because there's other people there, and they're saying, hey, he's not breathing, he's not moving, and he's still there, right? That's where it's hard for me to give the benefit of the doubt on that one, because it's like, well, if you maybe your specific goal in your brain was like, okay, I want to kill this man, But it's like it would be like if you got into a fight. It would be like if you got into a physical fight with someone and you knock them out, okay? And they're literally lying on the ground, and you're still wailing, and people are like, "Yo, he's not moving, like he's not like, you know," and you're still wailing on the, like, maybe in your mind your goal isn't, okay, I'm trying to kill this person, but your actions is showing like, okay, you have a clear disregard for the unnecessary harm and suffering which you're now causing. It's like when people
that's a fair analogy.
Yeah,
it's the difference between premeditated and
but a murder doesn't have to be premeditated. I think first degree has to be premeditated, right? I believe second or third doesn't. It's also like when people are sort of like reckless, or what's the right term when someone is kind of not abandons, but they, you know, like with their children, or like they leave their dog in a car with the windows. What's the right word? What's the, you know what I mean?
Because I often, you gave me an example, and I often think of oh God, this is highly controversial. The parents of Madeleine McCann.
Yes.
I always think, hold on, what the fuck? Did you just get away with that because you're white doctors? Because if that was well, we've got a case recently in the UK. Well, she'd left a child for 6 days, so that's a lot worse. But
what's that called? There's a word for that. It's not abandonment.
No,
but it's really annoying.
This is old age. Forgetting words. Old age. You talk, I'll think about it.
Yeah. So there's that. You know, it's like it's sort of just a total lack of care. So harming or killing someone through a total lack of care and disregard for what's potentially happening there, rather than sort of wanton violence. You know, like if it's a hot day and you leave a dog in a car, or even a child in a car, and the windows are up, and you go off and you go shopping, and you come back like an hour later and something really bad has happened, it's like, okay, in your brain, that wasn't like a direct attempted murder, but it's
neglect.
Neglect, yes. Neglect, literally, yeah. How did I forget that?
I googled it.
How did I forget that?
Yeah.
So neglect,
it's old age.
Yeah. So neglect can also be a criminal offense, right? Because as a parent of children, like you are in the, if my neighbor leaves their child alone in the house for 3 days with no food, like I don't get arrested for that, because that's not my responsibility, and I'm not aware of it. If I'm aware of it and I still neglect it, actually, and they can show that I knew about it, then I could probably still get in trouble, because it's like, well, you were supposed to do something and you didn't, and as a result of your inaction, you know, something bad happens, etc. So it's all of that. But coming back to the COVID thing, it's I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's really, really shady with it. But one thing is that people don't want to just look at the numbers. So we've already accepted that okay, the numbers are higher than what the direct deaths from COVID. But even if you go by the official published numbers, which I've just pulled up in front of me, or NHS England, I don't know if you've looked at this, but I mean,
let me get up my side. What's the page? How did you find it?
Yeah, sure. Let me okay. Let me can I send messages on this?
There's a chat in here. Send it to me and I'll have a look.
Okay, let me send this, because this is really important, because they've been collating all of the data from the beginning. So okay, I see the chat. Okay, so open this up. I think this is the most recent one from 1st of April.
All right.
So this is all of the deaths. This file contains information on the deaths of patients who have died in hospitals in England and have tested positive for COVID-19. And so this is cumulative. So if you go to tab number 3.
Hold on, I'm just opening it up.
Okay.
Well, it's an Excel file.
Yeah, it's Excel.
Because they distribute in spreadsheets.
Yeah, they've been publishing this for the past year, every single week, with the updated numbers.
Which tab? Death by gender, death by ethnicity?
If you go to tab 3, death by condition. Okay, so this is throughout the entire pandemic. So this is cumulative throughout the entire thing. Okay?
Okay.
So if you look at this, so in total in England there have been 86,308 deaths recorded, of which 76,649 are people over 60 with pre-existing conditions. So in on all of England, less in total, regardless of age, 3,542 deaths of people without pre-existing conditions. So
known,
okay,
known. You could say known, because I wonder.
Okay, you could say known.
So, for example, yeah, because I wonder if, so for example, you may be undiagnosed diabetic.
Mm-hmm. But there's also a column here saying. There's also a column saying unknown. I know it's all zeros.
Yeah, they've not. It's all zeros, so they've not used it. But I was just maybe that's for the future. But perhaps some like certain, because if you're diabetic, you may not have been. You may not have. You might be diabetic and not know, right?
Yeah.
It's only at the point where you have some concern, you go to the doctor, and they're like, "Hey, yeah, you're diabetic."
Mm-hmm.
So you might be diabetic, but we know it affects people with diabetes.
Sure.
So perhaps that number would be higher as well.
Yeah, maybe so. Okay, but so let's look. I mean, look at the ages. Okay, so the average age of death with COVID is 82. Mm-hmm. That's the same as the average life expectancy, bro.
Yeah.
Right. So the average age of death is 82. So 89% of the deaths are people over 60 with a known pre-existing condition. Okay, and this is not me saying that people over 60 right don't matter. So very far from it. But the point is that most of the people dying are over 80. And we've locked down so in terms of the measures we've taken, we've locked down 65 million, like whether you're 5 years old or you're 15 years old or you're 25 or you're 35, like you've locked down everybody for something where 89% of people dying are over 60 with pre-existing health conditions. So, I mean, yeah. I've been consistent all the way through. I've always said that. Okay,
oh, you have.
Yeah, no. So from the beginning, I mean, we've known this since over a year ago. So I've been saying from the beginning, like, why don't we, rather than this one size fits all approach? And yes, I understand viruses transmit, but rather than this one size fits all approach, like, why are we not? I mean, I'd still oppose locking down elderly people because I think they still should have the right to make their own choices and risk assessments and analysis as they've done their entire lives.
If I was 80, I would lock myself down.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? If you're at risk, you have the right, you have the freedom to distance yourself. You have the right to take whatever precautions you think are needed. My thing throughout this whole thing is okay. So let's look at people under 40. Okay, even if they have pre-existing health conditions, we're talking throughout this entire thing. 635 deaths. 635 in 14 months. And all these people have been suffering all these lockdowns and consequences, et cetera. And I'm just like, to me, this is there's no proportionality here, right? If you keep in mind that
can I just jump in there?
Yeah, go ahead.
So a couple of things. I don't think we've known for a year, because I remember when the lockdowns happened. At the time the lockdowns happened, like, I definitely had a different position than I have now, because we were seeing videos in China of people like collapsing on the street and dying. Like,
yeah, that was
happened.
That was like February. That was like January, February.
I still think we didn't fully know.
By April last year, we knew that this thing was very heavily skewed towards elderly people. We knew that by April.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. But yeah. I don't believe the lockdowns are about death at all. I think they're about illness and the NHS. And I think the government did it for the NHS. Yeah, you could probably say, okay, there's a percentage, maybe it's 80-20, but I think primarily they did it for the NHS because the hospitals were, to begin with, seeing a lot of patients coming in, and I think I think that's what it was about. And then over time, because I've spoken to some doctors and some both in the UK and abroad, and obviously you said your father. I think over time there's been a better understanding of how to treat it. Lay people on their front, not their back, give steroids, blah blah blah. I think we're in a very different place now than at the start. I was more sympathetic towards the start. I'm less sympathetic now.
Yeah, the truth is, I mean, by the point, but the thing is, the start was like January, February, March last year. By April last year, I mean, the first lockdown was sort of had been done by this time last year. I mean, the data points I'm pulling out, because we had this not just for England, we had this for places all over the world, right? Because at the very beginning, the truth is, the very first lockdown, regardless of someone's views on this, like whether or not you thought it should have been mandated, right? Like, I've opposed to it being mandated from the beginning. But if you tell me, I did not oppose primarily sitting in my house and being cautious for a couple of weeks, because you remember how they sold it, right? Flatten the curve. We need enough time to remember they had said they had a shortage of PPE. So we need to buy some time to get PPE. It's a new virus. We're not yet sure about some of the death rates, et cetera. So we need to buy some time. We don't want the hospitals to be overwhelmed. We want to flatten the curve because if too many people get sick at the same time, et cetera. It was sold. It made sense. It was logical, right? It made sense. And everyone was like,
just a slight,
okay, go ahead.
Slight correction on your dates. I've just got it here. The PM announced the stay-at-home order 23rd of March.
Okay.
And 1st of June was phase reopening of schools.
Okay.
So it wasn't until June we reopened back up.
Okay,
but I mean, it's not far off.
Yeah, sure. I might be mixing because I follow lots of different countries on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the truth, okay, absolutely, we know certainly by like spring, early summer last year, we had the data, right? Like the so-called first wave had happened. We've got the data. We're like, okay, 90% of the people dying are over 60 with pre-existing conditions. Like we know that. We've got that. It matches up with data from Germany, Italy, USA, Asia, etc. So we know that. So my thing was, look, to me, I mean, I don't think lockdowns should be done in virtually any situation. And actually, the World Health Organization agrees with me on that one. But the thing is proportionality, right? Proportionality. So, and also not the one size fits all thing has also been maddening to me from the very beginning, because we are not talking about something where it's just been very myopic, because lockdowns have very severe consequences, I think it's entirely possible. I don't know how you'd measure this. If it hasn't already, it's entirely possible. And I think very likely, very probable that more people will die as a result of the government response than the virus itself. Right. Whether you're talking about,
it's almost an impossible measure, because we can't know what would have happened if there hadn't been a lockdown. We just can't know.
Well, we can look at places that didn't lock down.
Yeah, but there's always different factors.
Of course it is. But okay, let's say, okay, if you look at the US data, there is no correlation between states that locked downs and ones that didn't, and the death rates per million. No correlation at all. In fact, the median death rate of the places that did lock down is higher, right? So I'm not saying that the lockdowns itself caused that, because we know correlation isn't causation, but take an obvious example. Florida. Florida has the second oldest population in the USA. Florida's been open for over a year. Okay, so if lockdowns were super effective and masks were super, you would think, okay, whether or not you agree with lockdowns, you would think, oh wow, okay, Florida is gonna get hit hard. Florida has it's ranked number 27 in the death rates in the USA. You can look at North Dakota and South Dakota. I think North Dakota didn't lock down. South Dakota didn't. No difference, right? You can look at the UK, you compare it with Sweden, Belarus, right? I think Sweden has a even lower death rate than the UK. It is higher than some of its neighbors, but it's lower. So I think the US is the best example for that, because you do have state by state data, and the policies were based on a state by state basis. And the truth is, if lockdowns and masks were very effective, it wouldn't be a debatable thing. Whether you agree with the mandates or not, it wouldn't be debatable. It would be like, okay, wow, okay, we can clearly see this correlation here. But the fact that there is no correlation, I know people want to believe that they've made a difference, but the truth is they haven't. I mean, I think for the past 6 months, a lot of stuff has just been sunk cost fallacy and ego protection, because nobody wants to feel like, man, like no one wants to feel like, okay, we just
fucked up.
Yeah, we've just suffered for over a year and we've done all this. And the truth is, it hasn't made a big difference. Like no one wants to do that. Like, look, Texas reopened. Were you paying attention when Texas reopened, or when they announced it was going to? Do you remember on Twitter, everyone was, even Joe Biden came out and said, this is reckless. This is going to cause a spike in deaths. This is the governor of Texas is basically issuing a death warrant on his people. All these blue check marks were going crazy, whatever. What's happened in Texas in the past 4 weeks? Cases massively dropped. Deaths massively dropped. You've got filled up stadiums. You've got music concerts going on, etc. They're fine, right? People wanted Texas to do badly, because then it confirms what they believed. Yeah, but now they've just gone silent, right? They've just gone quiet. No one is saying, "Oh, actually, I was wrong about Texas." They've just gone quiet and they've moved on to the next thing. But people like myself remember that, and we're like, okay, well, Texas has just shown, and Texas is a big Texas is bigger than the UK. Texas is a big place, and they're having like full on events and whatever. And you know, there's no mask mandates, there's no restrictions, there's no capacity limits, there's no lockdowns. So if the
could it be that all the 80-year-olds are dead now? We've killed all the 80-year-olds. There's none of them left to die.
But Texas didn't do any. Kidding. Yeah, but the thing is, Texas didn't do any worse to begin with than all the others. I mean, the worst affected places were New Jersey and New York, and somehow their governors are still getting praised. But there just wasn't a correlation. Like the truth is, like I am against lockdown and I am against mask mandates, right? So, but despite that, I would still expect that. Okay, the places that lock down, like logically, the places that lock down should have lower death rates, like all other things considered. I know you can't compare any two places perfectly, but you'd think, okay, there'll be a trend. So when I saw that there was no trend, like my mind was blown because I wasn't even like expecting that. I was just like, oh, wow, like there's really not a correlation here. Like not even like a strong, there's none. And
I mean, I don't know the data now, so like I can't answer that. All I know is my position definitely changed.
Sure.
Like at the start, I was like, I think it's very hard to say. Like when the first lockdown happened, I was just very conscious of what was happening, and I was like, look. Because I spoke to my friend who works in a hospital. They had a massive influx of patients coming in. Like I interviewed him, and he was, you know, he was getting quite upset during it. You know, it felt serious. I was thinking of my dad, and I was like, okay, look, I get this. I get what the government's doing. I support it, whatever. And then I think what I kind of realize is it's not so much whether the lockdowns work or they don't work. I think in my head, I think the net cost is worse.
Yes.
With a lockdown, the net cost on business, culture, mental health. You know, my mental health has been kind of okay, but I've seen family members affected. I've spoken to friends who are affected. People have lost their companies. They can't run their business. They can't pay food. We've had a massive problem of feeding children in our country. Like, there's so many issues, right?
Yeah.
Suicide rates, abuse in the home. I think the net cost is worse. And I think in the end, we could have made our own choices. We could have scaled up the NHS. We did build, you know, the government did build all those Nightingale hospitals. I just think the net cost is worse. Yeah. But I also think it is a complicated problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, that is my position, right? It's because we're not talking about the way people have been framing it, especially the, you know, very pro lockdown people, is they framed it as if lockdowns barely have any consequence, right? So it's kind of like, okay, either you lock down and all we're focusing on is this, you know, the hospitals and COVID death rates, not even death rates in general, like COVID very specifically. It's very myopic. It's like, okay, everything is COVID is the highest priority. And this is something I tweeted earlier. It kind of went viral, and it's like, who decided that COVID-19 deaths are the most important thing in the world? Like who decided that, right? Because that's not a medical question. It's a philosophical question, right? So why do we care more about COVID deaths than all the other things that kill people? So last year, by official numbers, there were about, and again, this number will be inflated, but being as liberal as possible, there were around 2 million deaths globally. With COVID-19, 2 million globally. About 66 million people die every year. So we're talking 2 out of 66 are COVID, and all the focus is on. Yeah, it's a very small percent. And again, we know the average age, let's say, is 80. Okay, and we know that. Look, I know people don't even like saying this because like this is not a controversial statement. We all know that there's a difference between an 80-year-old dying of a disease and a 5-year-old or a 20-year-old. We know that, right? This is not saying that. We all know, yes, human life is created equal, but if you're 80, there's a lot of stuff that can take you out, right? Like you could just have a fall and die, right? So as you get older, we know the body gets weaker, and you know, death unfortunately is something that happens, right? So death is not new.
Death is part of life.
It's part of life, right? Everybody dies. I'm going to die. You're going to die. We're all going to die. And so, but we've been acting as if like, okay, no, it's all the same. It's very myopic. And it's also been very binary. So if I say oppose lockdown, if I say from the start, I oppose lockdowns, and people are like, oh, so you want to just let it rip through the population? And I'm like, are these the only two options? Are the only options either we put 65 million people on house arrest, make it illegal for them to travel, to see their friends, to see their families, have old people dying alone and their families can't visit them. Every business has to, all these small businesses have to shut down and go broke and close. Millions of people becoming unemployed, with the mental health, like all of that, or we just let it rip. And I'm like, what's with this false dichotomy? Can we not take like a measured approach? We're like, okay, 90% of people dying are over 60 with pre-existing health conditions. Okay, so what we need to do is isolate those people, right? Prioritize those people. Let's keep everybody else. Even the whole protect the NHS thing. How is the NHS funded, man? How is the NHS funded? Like, if people are not working, are we protecting the NHS in the long run? Well, where's that money going? Where's that money? That's what I mean. So it's been very,
like, how much has Rishi Sunak borrowed? Like, we're talking hundreds of billions, right?
I don't even know.
Imagine he took that total number, right? And he said, right, what we're going to do is we're going to scale up the NHS.
There you go.
We're going to train nurses and assistants, and we're going to be able to deal with the influx of patients. But what we are going to say to people is, look, let's just be as careful as we can. Let's create a bubble around old people's homes. And then we have a choice. You have a choice as a person. Do you want to see your family or don't you? If you want to see your family, this is a risk you're taking. And if you get ill, you might die. Like, I locked my dad in a bubble, right? He needed to be. He's asthmatic, smoker. He's in his 70s. Like, he is a perfect candidate for, if he got COVID, he might die. Sure. And that was our choice. You know, I think I think the government could have mandated certain things. There's certain limited restrictions.
Like what sort? Okay, maybe like large gatherings or something like that.
Yeah, maybe just like, let's not have football stadiums full of people right now.
That's fair.
You know, let's maybe not have concerts full of people right now. You know, let's maybe, I don't know, just, I'd have to think it through. Like, and I don't know the details, so I'm not to make it. Let's say nobody can just go to old people's homes. There have to be appointments or something, and there has to be an agreement. Like,
dude, I mean, that's reasonable. That's what I mean. It's like, it's measured, right? Not rather, a volume dial rather than an on and off switch, right?
Yeah, on and off switch.
Yeah, to me, it's a bit like, okay, if you I like analogies.
Sweden
you can probably see. Yeah, they did.
Sweden
exactly.
Did it. They had a dial, and they've turned their dial up.
Yeah,
but they've not gone, like, they haven't gone full lockdown like everybody else.
Yeah. So if if you had a rat in your house, right, and you're going out and you call someone, hey, like, while I'm out, can you deal with this rat in the house? And you come back and they've just like burned down half the house. And you're like, dude, I just wanted you to get the rat.
Dude, it wasn't a spider. It was a fucking rat.
Yeah, I didn't say. So I feel like, there's a rat, and we are like burning down the entire house, or like amputating this whole body part because you're trying to deal with this one targeted thing. And I'm just like, I'm not a policymaker, right? I'm a rapper, I'm a creator, but I'm a thinker. And I've said for literally a year now, like, okay, why? I don't get this one size fits all, like very, very, that's the point where it also breeds the conspiratorial thinking, right? Because it doesn't make sense. The truth is, every single person knows that there are some aspects of this thing that do not make sense and have not made sense. Whether you're whether that's people saying, experts saying, don't wear a mask this time, around this time last year, to them saying, wear one. And now in the USA, they're trying to get people to wear two. And there was no explanation of that. Whether that was, if you remember, do you remember the BLM stuff last year? You must do.
Yeah.
If you remember,
right?
No,
we talked about it.
Yeah, exactly. So there was the hypocrisy around them, medical professionals supporting that, but then, blaming Trump rallies or anti-lockdown protests on, coronavirus spread, all that kind of stuff, all this hypocrisy. When you go into a restaurant and, you wear a mask standing up, but when you sit down, you can take it off. But like, there's been a lot of stuff that does not make sense. And everyone knows, everyone's like, wait, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. So that's what also feeds into the conspiratorial thinking, because it's like, wait, there's another agenda that's going on here. Because if the simple rule, bro, they've shut the gyms for 3 months.
It's fucking so-called mental. That's the thing I don't agree with.
Okay, so public health, right? What's the biggest comorbidity for COVID? obesity.
Being a fat ass.
Yeah, being obese. So you're trying to.
I put a stone on.
So you're trying to convince me that in the name of public health, you haven't just shut all the gyms for months, but I can still go to KFC. I can still go to McDonald's, right? But I can't go to the gym. So if I go to a KFC and I'm ordering at KFC, that somehow doesn't spread the virus. I mean, I don't have it anyway, but okay, that's fine. But going to the gym and all the gyms had already taken precautions. They'd already spaced things out. They'd already done all that. And there was no evidence. There was no evidence that the gyms were a place where this was really spreading. Bro, they even shut the outdoor gyms. In Southampton, where I live, there's an outdoor gym. They've removed all the bars.
They took the basketball nets off the basketball in the courts when my son plays basketball. They took the hoop off. And he was like, Dad, they've taken the hoops off. I'm like, for fuck's sake.
To me, I'm like, that's sinister. Right? To me, I'm like, that can't just be incompetent. Like, we know that this thing does not spread outside. Like, we know it doesn't spread outside. We know that.
I think it's a bit incompetence.
Man, see, I think a big difference with us is you give them more benefit of the doubt than I do, right? Like I'm just no, this is it's too many things. It's too many things for me to just be incompetent. And then you have the fact that now people are I was talking about vaccine passports 6-7 months ago, and people were saying, Zuby, you're crazy conspiracy theorist. They're never going to do that. People and now
I think it was obvious.
Yeah, but now people are like seeing it, and Let
me ask you, are you going to take the vaccine?
Go ahead. No, why would I?
You're going to take a vaccine?
No, why would I?
Because what if they say you can't travel without it? Just say they can't. Would you take it for the sake of being able to travel, or will you stay here?
I'm going to get out of here. Don't worry.
Yeah, I'm going to take it.
No, like, bro, I've already got immunity. Why would I even take it? Like, even if there were vaccine passports, I'd be eligible for one because I've already got the antibodies.
You haven't got 100% guaranteed immunity, but you've got most likely 99.9999.
Yeah, I've got the immunity that someone else would get by taking the vaccine. Yeah. So the thing is, my position on all of these things is not. It's actually really funny when my detractors are even calling me selfish, because the truth is, on all levels of this, I personally am not someone who has been or will be as affected as millions of other people. Right. So whether it's the virus itself, so, I'm young, I'm healthy, I've actually had it, I've recovered, I'm fine. I'm not at massive risk from that. I'm not at massive risk from the economic downside. I'm self-employed. I can make money from anywhere. I'm fine. My finances have not taken any hit whatsoever. Even when it comes down to these, I don't even want to call them vaccine passports, right? Because I think that's giving them too much credit. They're really freedom licenses. Even when it comes to that, I would be easily able to get one as someone who's already had it and recovered. But so I'm not like just thinking for me. I'm thinking for man, there are millions and millions and millions of people out here on all different sides of this thing who are really getting hurt, who are really getting harmed. I've heard of like I've heard of more people committing suicide than I've heard of or know of people who have died with COVID.
Yeah, I want to know.
Especially on the younger demographic. Yeah, like
I need to validate that one, because I've heard that. And
I don't know.
If it happened, it wouldn't surprise me. Sure. But I would want to validate it.
Well, the truth is, we know for a fact already that under 40. The suicide rate in the UK on average is about 6,000 a year on average. And as we know, how many people let's go under 60. How many people under 60 at most have died with COVID? According to the NHS in England, it is, including comorbidities, 6,800. And we know on an annual basis, if we make that under 40, then it comes down to 635. So that's about 1/10 of the average number of suicides. And I don't think the official data is going to come out for several months, but we'll
be looking.
Yeah, we'll be looking, and they might downplay the official numbers, but they might have committed
suicide and have had COVID within 28 days.
Yeah, I think throughout this whole thing, there's just been a lot of aspects of the conversation that are not being taken seriously and not being considered. Another part, I was talking about this with my family over the weekend, is just the effect on young people, right? Whether you're talking school age children or toddlers, or you're talking about just young people, like they don't really have a voice in this whole thing, right? The focus is so much on, if you're 40 plus and you're, pretty sort of stable and you've got your life together already, I think it's relatively easy to be like, oh, come on, the lockdowns aren't that bad. Like, of course, you're situated, you're fine. But for someone who's 20, for someone who's 15, for someone who's 10, it's like, man, okay, are we thinking about what impact this is having? Even all this stuff of them sending kids back to school and making them put masks on. I'm like, why? Like, why are you doing this to children? Like, why are you doing that, man? Like, to me, that's, that goes beyond incompetence.
Well, I'm living this with my kids, man. I've seen it through my son, how it's impacted him, my daughter. Like, it's changed a lot. It's not good. But it does leave me. I want to ask you another thing then. Okay, so when we talked earlier about abortion, you said you are pro-life in terms of legislation.
Yes.
But you obviously also have... You are a bit of a libertarian, issues with the state. So what do you think the role of the state is? Because this is... it's a conversation I get in with a lot of people on Bitcoin because, again, there's a spectrum of people who believe in no state, minimal state, full state. I'm not an anarchist. I don't believe in no state. I just, and I understand the arguments, and I think theoretically they're great, but I just don't see how it works on a number of different levels. But I don't know the answer because. I've seen very solid arguments for having a state like Singapore, which is very much it is pretty authoritarian, but is run like a company.
A bit like Saudi Arabia,
clean, like Saudi Arabia.
Yeah,
I have my issues with Saudi Arabia.
Sure,
we don't need to get into that. So you've got these more authoritarian states that seem to operate quite efficiently, but have some nasty senator undertones. You have full democracies that can be a bit of a mess.
Yeah,
I think what I'm getting to is my brother. I was having a conversation with my brother about it, and he said, Pete, basically what you have to accept is chaos, and everywhere you go, there is a push and a pull in different directions, and embrace the chaos. There is no utopian. There is no perfect solution. Just everything just is always being pulled in different directions. Where do you sit with all this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I agree with your brother on that. Definitely. The truth is that human beings are very deeply flawed, individually, let alone collectively. Like we are just flawed. So any system involving humans is going to be deeply flawed. That's just the reality of it at every level. So my personal position is, I believe I sort of follow the fairly traditional, I guess, American view on rights and liberties, which is that they are natural and or from God, depending on one's belief system. I'd say that, the most basic human rights come from God, right? You're just born with them, right? What if you were just on a desert island, kind of what rights would you have? And then to me, the role of government primarily is to protect those rights. So the number one role of government to me is to protect your right to life, and then, extend that to your right to bodily integrity and not being harmed. And then I guess the next step would be your private property, right? So I cannot kill you or harm you or take your stuff, essentially. And the government's role, the primary role of the government to me, like as an absolute minimum, is to take care of that, right? So if someone wants to come in and harm you or take your stuff or kill you or kill someone near you or whatever, there's a role for government to do its best to prevent that happening. And or if it happens, there should be some justice for the person who's violated that, right? So to me, that's kind of like the core. That's really, really the core. And anything beyond that, I think I view it kind of like concentric circles. And I guess a big difference in political opinion is how wide and big do you think that circle should be? If you expand it outwards, you get to, public roads and public facilities and things like that. You expand it wider, you get into education, and schooling, and, I guess, potentially, healthcare, et cetera. You extend it wider, you get into, I don't know, welfare policies or whatever. You expand it super wide, you end up with things like universal basic income or, guaranteed jobs. I don't know how that would work or whatever. So I think really a lot of political views are. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Whereas full circle, government has total control. The state, you don't even own stuff. There's no private property anymore. State owns everything, provides everything, etc. So to me, I think most libertarians, I think with libertarians, obviously anarchists, there's like the circle is a dot, or it's non-existent.
No,
minarchists,
no
there's no circle. Minarchists, it's like a dot. Libertarians, it's a very small circle. Conservatives, a little bit bigger, and then the more liberal, gets bigger. Progressive gets bigger, until, like you said, you get to communism. So with me, I'm someone who's I don't mind being called honestly, I don't really care too much for labels, but I guess I'm in the libertarian conservative zone. So for me, the role of governments is to protect those basic fundamental rights. It's not to give you loads of stuff. It's not to like do a bunch of stuff for you. It's to protect your basic rights and your safety and property, so that then you can do the stuff you want to do. You can then go create your family, create your life, create whatever you want, pursue your dreams, create your businesses, whatever, without someone just being able to walk in there and like shoot you and take your stuff and roll off with it. To me, that's that's the primary core function of government.
I like these concentric circles. I'm definitely going to be stealing this as a way of explaining it. I think it's a really good way of explaining it. I will credit you. I'll be like, my friend Zuby told me about this, but I do like that idea, because I was definitely like, as a child, and I think a lot of children will have a large circle. They, if I turn around to my daughter who's 11 and say to her, do you think we should, our government should help homeless people get homes? She's going to say yes. And if somebody loses their job, should we give them some money? Yes. And do you think if someone breaks their leg, they should get treated in hospital for free? They're going to say yes. So I think that's a natural thing. And I think some ways, as you grow, some people stay quite socialist, quite left wing, and I think a lot of people, I don't know, but people can gradually, that circle get smaller. I would say my circle's definitely wider than yours.
Sure.
But it's shrinking. I've only ever voted Conservative in the UK. I've never voted for the Labour Party, but I've definitely had previously socialist sympathies, but they're getting smaller.
Yeah.
Like, I historically like the NHS. I have issues with it now. Do I want to get rid of it completely? No, but potentially I'd maybe change. Like, it's a shrinking circle. But what I have realized is that one of the biggest mistakes the government makes is trying to insulate us from our own mistakes and pain.
Yes, agreed.
That's my biggest issue.
Agreed. And the thing is, as well, is if someone else gives you something, they can also take it away, right? So that's also, this goes beyond government. It's just a general thing. So even myself being we're both independent, right? We're both independent. So no one can just like take your podcast from you, right? No one can just like take, my career or my fan base, or they can't just kind of come and take it. But if it's sort of handed, but if it's handed to you, it can be taken away. And then, of course, with most things, we all know that due to the nature of free markets and competition, that increases efficiency and brings down prices, right? So if the government has a monopoly on something, then we all know everything government run, it tends to be inefficient, because there aren't those competitive forces there, and that kind of goes across the board with everything. So that's kind of where my general philosophy comes from. And I think also this is another thing that I think leads to unproductive conversations across the political aisle often, is that it was interesting when you used that example of what you said your daughter would say, right? Because a lot of the conversation isn't necessarily about what should be done or if something should be done. It's about who you think should do it and where the responsibility falls. So someone who's more socialistic leaning will say, the government should do that. The government should do that. The government should do that. If you ask me, do I think something should be done for homeless people? I'm like, yes, absolutely. Right? Do I think that, do I want people in poverty, or do I want like kids not being educated? No, I don't. Of course not. Like, any decent person is like, yeah, we don't want that. The question is, okay, so where does the responsibility fall? Like, I'm very, very pro charity, right? I'm both, whether like, you know, and even large charitable organizations can start to have their problems when they get too big as well. But I'm very pro charity. I'm very pro helping people, especially the old, you know, the old teaching a man to fish kind of axiom. I'm very big on that. And I generally believe that individuals or private institutions or private companies, et cetera, in general, tend to do a better job of that than the government does. And I also think that the benefit of it being done that way is it can actually be attributed to something. I think one of the big problems I have with the welfare state actually is that people feel like, I think, you know, if someone is on welfare, they sort of feel like the money is it feels like an entitlement, right? And also because the money comes from the government. The truth is that money is coming from other people who are working. But because of the nature of it and the way that it's viewed and even communicated, it's like the person, number one, just feels entitled to it. And number two, they don't understand where, they don't really see where it's coming from, right? So if you're down and out and you're in a bad position and other people help you, you know who helped you. You know, okay, when I'm successful, I want to pay back that person, or I just want to say thank you to this person. I want to thank this individual or whatever because they helped me through this period. So it's a lot more sort of like human and natural and reciprocal, et cetera, versus if it's just like, okay, some nameless government cuts you some money or gives you this thing and you can't pay it back really. You don't know where it came from. You don't see who was taxed that money for it to go to you, et cetera. And it sort of feeds this entitlement mentality. So I think even from a kind of wider sort of sociological perspective, that's also important, let alone the efficiency. Like we know, government is the master of wasting money.
The absolute master of wasting money.
Yeah. So
do you know if any work's been done? And I'd love to know this, like a study of the net benefit of taxation and redistribution, like comparing states. Like my friend's about to move out to Sweden. He's like, I'm about to move to the Swedish Utopia and pay 70% tax. But I don't know, like, the measure of the standard of living there. I kind of have this outside perspective that it seems pretty good, but I know there's some problems in certain cities, and I don't know if that's because of poverty or immigration, whatever. I know there's other countries where there is no welfare state, and there is high crime rate. Now, I don't know if you look across Europe, which is like you would say modern liberal democracies, if there is a net benefit to the nation. I don't even know how you measure it, by having some form of welfare state.
Yeah, it's hard. And, I think another factor as well is that there's the whole, libertarians often say, taxation is theft, which it is. It's just that it's, the government does a lot of stuff that the state does a lot of things that anyone else would be arrested for if they even
illegal. Yeah.
Try. Yeah. So again, as someone who's kind of like, you have a right to your stuff. I'm not a pro-tax person, right? To me, and that's not to me, that's like an ethical, that's like just an ethical and moral position, right? I very much believe that if you are blessed and you've been successful and you are wealthy and you have excess, maybe this comes from my Christian beliefs, but I very much feel like morally you should give a lot, right? You should be very charitable. You should help a lot of people. You should give. I believe that, but I have a more massive moral issue with the notion that it should be coerced, right? That the government should come and put a gun to your head and say, "Hey, man, you've made this much money. Like if you don't give us this money, like it's extortion, right? If you don't give us this money, we're going to take it. It's not just theft; it's robbery, right? Because you're going to."
But when you talk about being in your concentric circle, you say outside of libertarian, kind of in conservative, like in that kind of zone, and you talk about the government providing certain services.
My circle's shrinking too, man. My circle's been shrinking for years.
I can't imagine we can provide those without taxation. I had a good chat with Dominic Frisby. I don't know if you know him, but I think you would have a great chat with him.
I know the name.
Yeah, I think he's more close to you. I think he's in between us, basically. But he's like, I'm not opposed to tax. I just don't think it needs to be 40%. I don't mind 10, 15% tax.
Look, I'll be real, man. I mean, when I say I'm libertarian or I'm libertarian leaning, I'm like, look, anything closer to that position,
smaller.
Exactly. So if it's like, okay, current tax, if you're being taxed 40 and then it's a movement down to 30, or down to 20, right? Yeah, of course, you know, a hardcore ANCAP will be like, no, we must go straight to zero.
Zero.
But at the
big red button.
but at the same time, I also, you know, I have my sort of ideals and my ideas, and then I'm also very pragmatic and realistic. So it's like, okay, a shift in this direction, right? We were talking before about like the pro-life thing, right? I would love to see, you know, I would love to see a 20%, 30%, 50%, 70%, 80% reduction in the number of human beings who are having their lives terminated before they are born. Of course, I'd love that to be zero. I'd like the murder rate to be zero, right? I'd like there to be no, but anything that like shifts that in the right direction to me, I'm like, okay, well, that's a win, right? That's progress. That's a step forward. As we all know, man, like things don't happen just, a lot of things don't happen in reality. You just snap your fingers and boom, it's done. It's over. It's like, as we've said, the world is very imperfect. Things are complicated. Yeah, go ahead.
you're a Bitcoiner. Like everything, you're like all the Bitcoiners will say, Zuby, Bitcoin fixes us. Like I did this interview, stuck with me a long time ago. There's this libertarian. He's a bit of a shitcoiner, but he's a good guy. He's called Eric Voorhees. Splits community opinion. I like him. I love interviewing him about libertarian ideas, not Bitcoin versus shitcoins. But he said to me something in, I think, our second interview that really stuck with me. He said, I'm not saying let's get rid of the government. Let's just make it smaller. Let's just, next year, 5%, even 1%, let's just make it smaller. And have you seen that website, What the Fuck Happened in 1971?
I haven't, no.
Pop it up now. Let's show you. This is really interesting. This is what all the Bitcoiners go on about. Is WTF happened in 1971 or in 1971? I got it. WTF happened in 1971.com.
Okay.
So this guy, Ben Prentice, another guy, it's a really interesting thing. So you're probably seeing the chart here, right? This is where they came off the gold standard, essentially.
Okay.
So you're seeing the divergence between productivity and compensation. Okay, and you can go down the charts and you can look at real GDP, real wages, and trade policies, and you can see all these different charts all the divergence starts to happen when they came off the gold standard.
Yes,
and this is why the Bitcoiners say the problem is not having sound money, not having this monetary base. Because what you've done is you've essentially allowed the government to print money at will, right?
Yes.
And by allowing the government to print money at will, they're essentially destroying money in itself. And this allows the government to, with the ability to, think of it this way, right? You've got a house, you got your rent or mortgage, Zuby, and say you want to buy a bigger house, you've got to borrow more money from the mortgage provider, and if you can't pay it, they're going to take your house from you. Saying if you take a loan, and you've got to make sure you earn enough money to get by. And sometimes you hustle, dude. Sometimes you go down to a Manchester and down the street and you sell CDs. You hustle and you've made sure you get it. The government doesn't hustle.
No,
the government doesn't have the need like it used to when it was on a gold standard. They used to have that kind of overbearing responsibility, but now they don't have that standard because they've come off it. If they fuck up, if they can't pay their rent, they print more money, or they just take more of us. They just steal from us. And this is like the big argument that a lot of the Bitcoiners are making, that all, not all, but a lot of these issues that we're facing now are because of the money. A lot of, and I don't know how much time you've looked at this. I know you hold Bitcoin, or you are a bit of a Bitcoiner, but how much have you actually looked at all this?
Yeah, I think there's a very good point that is made there, because I mean, look, I'm not an expert, but the value of money it's tied to labor, right? So if you the more you disconnect money, or the existence of money, or the amount of it, from actual work being done and actual trade of goods and services taking place, the more the currency inflates, right? The money becomes less valuable because, simple supply and demand, but also it's not tied to anything anymore. So if you have like a bunch of people, just if nobody is working and no one is trading goods and services, which is what work is, and money is just kind of being flooded in, then that money quickly becomes worthless, right? It becomes worthless. So I think that, absolutely. A lot, I haven't seen, I'm keen to sort of look at this website in more detail. But yeah, definitely going off that gold standard. I mean, look, if something is unlimited, we all know if something is unlimited, then it tends to be less valuable. Right? If something is yeah.
If you had one of your Hewlett Packard printers in your lounge there, and you could just print a bunch of cash, I mean, you might say no, I wouldn't.
Then it has no value.
Would.
Yeah, because it has no value because it's unlimited, and it's not tied to any labor. So how far? Like, I certainly do think some Bitcoin maximalists probably overdo the Bitcoin fixes this thing and think like it literally fixed like everything, including like moral issues and ethical issues and all the like. I don't think it's that simple as, okay, we just get everyone on Bitcoin and we sort of reach this utopia. I'm not a fan of utopian thinking. Like, I think utopian thinking is actually very dangerous, as we've seen historically, right? When people imagine their own utopia and then actually seek to create it, it's dangerous. But I'm a big fan of incremental improvement. I'm a fan of drastic improvement quickly when that's feasible and possible. But I'm also very much I call myself an optimistic realist. So I want things to always be moving in a good and better direction. And that's one thing that that's one thing that does concern me about the world, I guess, particularly the modern Western world, is that by most, obviously the last year hasn't been great, but by most by most measurable measures, things are way, way better than they used to be, and generally than they've ever been, if we're talking certainly in terms of decades. But I do worry often about the moral and the ethical, I would say, I wouldn't even say a decline in every sense, because in some ways, again, things have gotten better, but I do sometimes worry about where the world is kind of going in that direction.
It's The Fourth Turning, man. Have you read that book?
I haven't read it. No. Who's it by?
Yeah. I'd have to look at. Is it Neil? I might get that wrong. Is it Neil?
Okay.
I want to say Neil. Is it Strauss Howe? I think it's Neil, because it's Neil Strauss. Is it Neil Strauss?
Neil Strauss is an author, but it doesn't sound like the kind of book he'd write.
No. Do you know what? I've confused the two, because it's William Strauss and Neil Howe, and I've confused it because Neil Strauss is that guy who did he's done a lot of those
The Game.
Yeah, The Game, but he also did that porn stars biography as well.
Yes, he did.
Jenna Jameson as well. He's done a lot of good and interesting stuff. But it's a really interesting book, and I did an interview on it. But I think it's that kind of like, we're in that period of good times create weak men situation. And we're seeing that kind of like, everything seems so good. We've all got, like, my kids have got iPads, and like my kids have got iPhones, for fuck's sake, like actual iPhones, everyone's so pissed off, unhappy,
and that creates its own problems. Like, that's a whole new minefield.
But it's that kind of like, we should be the happiest. We should be happy. Like, they should be good times. Yeah, everyone is unhappy and shouting at each other. So perhaps it's the fall of Rome now. People
need struggle, man. People need struggle. People need purpose. People need meaning. People need community. There's a lot more than. There's a lot. I'm going to be doing a podcast on, with a massive UBI advocate soon, actually. So even when it comes to something like, besides being a libertarian leaning, and UBI being a very socialist idea, like one of my main big pushbacks against something like that is, a lot of the problems, even a lot of the problems that people attribute to poverty, it's not as simple as lack of money. Right. It's not as simple as lack of money. I think we all know that, it's an old age saying that money doesn't buy happiness, which is true. But we also know that a lot of people's problems, there are problems that can be fixed with money, but there are a lot that can't. I mean, the UK, the US, these countries have trillions and trillions of pounds and dollars, et cetera. But it's not as simple as just like, okay, we can just throw money at any situation, whether it's individual or on a wider level, and fix it. And I think even doing work, the value of work goes way beyond making money, right? So I know a lot of people kind of, they feel like, oh, I wish I didn't have to work. I wish I didn't have need a job or whatever, and I could just get money kind of for nothing. But that in itself destroys the human spirit, right? And I think that I haven't got data on this, but, you know, I think that could probably be even looked at with some type of data, you know, not that you can measure spirit, but like how people's behavior changes. Like a lot of the value of work is doing something productive that is contributing to society in some way, shape, or form, even if you don't really feel like it is. I don't know, you're a waiter, or you're doing customer service or something, and maybe you don't feel appreciated, or you don't. But the truth is, you are offering something of value to society, and let alone the fact that, you know, you're using your brain, you're physically moving around, you're doing something that is valuable. So I think that that's kind of the weird thing with money is that, I don't know, like if you or I earned as much money as we did without putting in the work and the grind and the hustle, all that stuff that we're talking about, number one, we would be far less developed human beings, and we wouldn't actually have that much to offer the world. We may not be able to have this conversation because, like, we just, right, we'd be shells. We wouldn't have been through this stuff, and, you know, we just wouldn't have this perspective. So I don't know exactly where I'm going here, but I kind of have
proof of work, man. It's proof of work.
Great, literally great way to put it, right? Proof of work. And that's where the value comes from. And that's where I feel like, you know, a human being, certainly, you know, both men and women, but I'd say especially as a man. I mean, look, if you take away a man's work, then you leave him a shell of himself, right? You leave him a shell. I mean, we know that if a man loses his job or a woman loses her job, the man is far more likely to fall into depression at an extreme. He's far more likely to consider, you know, have suicidal thoughts, things like that. Because as a man, we know that in society, whether within our family or just society in general, our sort of value and our self-esteem, our self-worth, our confidence, all of that, it's tied to our work and, you know, being able to provide and being able to do something. So if you kind of take that away from a man, it really emasculates him, etc. It's also why I don't really like the idea of retirement, right? And I find that actually when men retire, that's when they really start to age, right? Like that's when they really start to age. Like if they keep working, you know, my dad's in his mid-70s and he's still working, and I'm glad he is, because it keeps him sharp, it keeps him engaged with society. It keeps him feeling valuable, and he's doing something that's, you know, if he'd retired 10 years ago and for the past decade had just been sitting there, I don't think he'd be in as good a state.
Check out Mick Jagger. Check out the Rolling Stones. They're all like 106 and they're still strutting it on stage, going down the gym and making babies. Yeah. Like, didn't one of them just have a baby and he's like 84 or something?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
And Mick Jagger goes to the gym every day. He's thin. He looks good. Like if he didn't have the incentive to get on stage,
I think
actually, how old is he? Because I might be an asshole.
He's probably in his 70s. Probably in his 70s.
What are you going to say? I haven't looked it up. I'm going to go 82. What are you going to say?
Oh, wow. Okay. I don't think he's that old. I'm going to say 75.
77. Yeah, but still
okay.
he's 77. Yeah, and he's still strutting it. He's still strutting it.
Yeah, you know, I think we're kind of like sharks. You know, if sharks stop swimming, they suffocate, right? So I think it's like you gotta stay in motion. I think even with the human body, right? Like if you don't move, you atrophy. Your muscles literally atrophy. You weaken. You know, like I'm looking forward to the gym's opening soon so that I can see how weak I've become. You know, but I've still been training. But like if you don't keep moving, if you don't keep, whether it's your brain, it's your mind, whatever it is, you have to stay in motion. You have to stay doing things. You have to stay creating a struggle. And I think this is also a big part of, you know, some of these social issues, and whether we're talking like all this woke stuff or like this SJW thing, whatever. I think a lot of it comes from the fact that human beings crave. It's weird. We're always trying to like avoid struggle, but we also crave it. There's this weird thing in us. And I think that's why, you know, now, like, dude, we're in 2021. I've never seen more people, especially online, talking about white supremacy. Right? It's 2021. I'm like, what are you guys even talking about? Like, where are all these white supremacists? Like, I keep hearing about white supremacy, I'm like, I wasn't hearing this in 2011 or 2001 or even 1991. You know, like, have the KKK just made some huge comeback? Are there neo-Nazis around? I'm like, no, but they've just diluted all these terms and are literally inventing things in their brain to sort of have this have this monster to fight against. And to me, it's a very,
I need drama.
Yeah, but it's really, really bizarre. Or, you know, when you get like super, super duper feminists and that, you know, the patriarchy, this and man, and I'm kind of like, what are you like? You live in London. Like, what are you talking about? Like when you say the patriarchy, it's like a ghost, you know, it's like this ghost that's just hovering around. And I'm kind of like, what exactly are you talking about? And they often can't even describe it, right? They can't define what they're saying, but yeah, but they just sort of feel this thing. And I'm kind of like, man, this is weird. Like, why can't you just go, actually, you know what? Things are not perfect, but actually they're pretty good. You know, if you live in the UK in 2021, things are pretty good. I know right now the situation is not great, but generally
I know what you're saying. Like,
yeah.
Let's go back 15 months. Things were okay, right? Things were okay.
Yeah, things were more than okay. Like if you have any global perspective or historical perspective, it would be hard to argue that. I remember I tweeted this once. I said, I think I tweeted this like 2 or 3 years ago. I tweeted, it went viral, but it was quite controversial, which says a lot. Because I said that if you live in the UK or USA right now, you live in one of the least racist, least sexist, least homophobic countries in the world, in the least racist, least sexist, and least homophobic time period ever in history. And I somehow caught flack from that. And I was like, that's a good thing.
Can I give you my favorite Zuby quote? And you did it on my show, and I don't know if you said it before. I'm going to give you my favorite Zuby quote. The demand for racism vastly outstrips supply.
Real talk.
Real talk.
It's so true.
Zuby.
It's so true.
Listen, man, this has been awesome. You know I can talk to you for hours. This has already gone on longer than I thought I would. I slipped in a little bit of Bitcoin. I had to do it, man. Okay, man. Listen, when's the album out?
The album is, so I don't know when this comes out, but the Kickstarter is running until the 14th of April. If you pre-order it on there, you will get it in May. The physical ones are going to be in June and most likely July or August for the vinyl. And generally, the wider release is looking like June or July. Okay. I don't have a set date yet. But yeah, exciting times.
When do you think you'll be performing on stage again?
Man, I think this summer, honestly. It might not be in the UK, but I think this summer it might end up being in, you know, Texas and Florida and all of that. But we'll see. I don't know where the UK is. I don't know where the UK is going, but I'm not going to be there in a couple months' time. Yeah, it's disturbing. I'm very concerned for the future of this country in a way that I've never been before. I do really, really hope that, okay, things sort of snap back and people quite quickly go to normal, just as quickly as they fell into this weird sort of madness and totalitarianism. But I think that it's a real fight. I think it's an important fight that people need to fully reclaim their freedom and not allow the government to just continue to push them around and keep shifting the goalposts and keep doing this and doing that. I mean, every day the justification for all of this stuff gets weaker and weaker and weaker, especially now that, you know, the vaccines are there. We've got 90% of the people who are 90% of the deaths and hospitalizations already immunized. You know, like I don't know, there were like 10 deaths yesterday or something like that. I mean, keeping 65, you know, stuff is going to open. I just hope that it snaps back really quickly. That's what I hope for.
Yeah, I agree, man. Well, listen, I appreciate you, man. I definitely learn from you. I definitely reconsider things for you. I don't always agree with you, but like
that's all good, man.
I do definitely rethink positions. My circle's getting smaller. I think I'm going to end up in Texas. I really do. I think I'm going to end up in Texas. I fucking love it there. I do. I love the people. I love life there.
Big fan.
And I like Austin because Austin has that nice. It's like a nice mix of blue and red. It's kind of purple. I like it. You can go and get your bit of red. You go and get your bit of blue. I like it. But no, dude, look, good luck with the album. Anything I can do for you, you know, you can reach out to me. Love what you're doing, man. Peace out.
Thanks so much, man. Appreciate it, Peter.